We've got some telling tape truths here on a Monday and a volatile coaching carousel. Man, do we have a busy show for you today. Just 157 days until the NFL draft. Mensch, you good? Mensch? Bueller? Ah, screw it. Tucker, roll that beat. With us on Saturday, you know that my dear friend and cohort here on the McShay Show, Steve Mensch, is not with us this week. We miss him dearly, but the show must go on, and we're thrilled for him because he's able to spend some much-needed time with his family. So all is good in his world and our world. So this is the McShay Show, presented by FanDuel, and college football Saturdays are heating up. Whether you're in for the early kick or the late-night action, FanDuel lets you bet your way with the same game parlays, live betting, game props, and more. And Missouri, get excited because FanDuel is coming your way on December 1st. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com/McShay and make every Saturday count. Must be 21 and older and present in select states, or 18 and older and present in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Welcome in. We've got a great show for you today. It is jam-packed. I'm not going to do the 10 tape truths because we'll leave 5 out because of Mensch, but we've got some additional things, so it'll feel like 8 or 9. Plus, Bruce Feldman. Couldn't think of a better time to have Bruce on. Good friend of the show, been a dear friend for over 2 decades. And very few, if any, are more dialed into what's going on in the coaching world and behind the scenes and reporting. And so with so many job openings right now, talking about LSU and Florida and Penn State and Arkansas and Oklahoma State and Virginia Tech and all these big names out there and potentially big names moving. We're going to get to that with Bruce after we get through some of the tape truths. So I will remind you, the McShay Report is out, recapping Saturday's games, and with the TMS Top 12, as we have tomorrow night, the rankings revealed. There'll be some interesting movement in there. How far does Alabama fall? What happens to a couple other teams? Is there anyone sneaking into the top 12? And so if you want the McShay Report, Google it. Very simple. Google the McShay Report, subscribe. We've had a lot of new subscribers in just the last week, and I think everyone's starting to gear up. We know the end of the college football season's coming, college football playoff, and the NFL draft starts to kick off. So a lot of good stuff coming your way, and then we'll be back on Thursday for our normal show, and then Mensch will be back on Saturday night. Big Saturday night, week 13 it is, coming up in college football before Thanksgiving, and things start to get a little crazy, which is fun. All right, let's dive right into it. Tape truth number 1. I'm trying not to overreact. It was just one performance, but was it really? I'm going to say this right now. If Georgia's defense continues to ascend, I think you can make an argument that the Bulldogs could wind up having the best team in the SEC when we enter into the college football playoff. Yes, the offense was really good again. And I've been stunned all year at the offensive production and what things have looked like in Gunnar Stockton. And Gunnar Stockton's become one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the country, both throwing the football and running the ball. The play action stuff, because they've shown a commitment to the run, has been awesome. 14 of 15 he was this past week on play actions. I think it was like 4 of 6 on throws over 20 yards down the field. I think all of them were off of play action. I went back and just studied this tape, both sides of the ball, Georgia's offense, Georgia's defense. This tape truth has a lot more to do with the defense, but I do want to say that this offense continues to ascend, and a lot of it is Gunnar Stockton and the way he is operating the offense for Mike Bobo, the offensive coordinator, and the dual threat ability that he brings to the table. And because as a defense, you have to account for it. And so when I look at this Georgia team and what we thought it was 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, it no longer is. It's a different team. And the offense has gradually continued to kind of play at a high level and gotten a little bit better in some of the intricacies. But it's the defense that we've been talking to you about for the last couple 3 weeks. It's never going to be that unit. The Trayvon Walker, the Jordan Davis, the Devontae Wyatt, and all those cats. It's just not going to be. But there's a lot of young talent that's starting to emerge and kind of mesh with the veteran talent. And we know about KJ Bolden at the safety position, continuing to make big plays. We know about CJ Allen, who got knocked out of the game this past weekend. And guess what? There wasn't a drop-off. And that's the thing that Georgia's always had. This secondary has to be protected. And watching Glenn Schumann, the defensive coordinator, and Kirby Smart throughout the season, and even more so in game, the adjustments they make to protect that backside. And they're getting better on the backside. But what I'm seeing is a front seven with depth. And then coaching that continuously is putting them in the right position to succeed. I talked about Mississippi State. It was a tape truth last week. They gave up that long 75-yard drive on the opening drive against Mississippi State and then locked it down basically until the fourth quarter when the game was kind of getting out of hand. And so we've seen gradual improvement. And here's why I said I'm throwing a little caution at my tape truth of that this could be the best team in the SEC by the time we go in the college football playoff. Because as I mentioned to you with Texas coming off that Oklahoma win, we've seen this before. Certain programs kind of own other programs. Certain coaches seem to, quote unquote, own other coaches. And there's been a lot of talk about Georgia owns Texas. Kirby owns Sark. And unfortunately for Texas and Sark, like, you can't deny those claims. I think it's a lot more complicated than that. But let's look at what's happened. In 12 quarters plus in overtime, I should say, against Texas over the last 13 months, Georgia has allowed 83 net rushing yards on 72 Texas rush attempts. That's wild. 1.1 yard per carry. And remember, this is a Texas team we talked about going into this game. Healthier on defense. Michael Taff is back. Healthy on offense. The healthiest they've been at running back all season long is the information coming out of Texas. Ryan Wingo back healthy, finally like 100%. 1.1 yards per carry allowed in those 13 quarters or 12 plus quarters. 16 sacks Georgia has had of Texas. Only allowed 2 touchdown drives of more than 36 yards. And 14.6 points per game allowed against Texas and Sark. That's amazing. But is it just a Texas thing? The reason I have some caution, but also some optimism is the caution is they kind of do own Texas in the last 2 years. The optimism is we've kind of seen this steady growth. And had I not come to you last week on Tape Trues when Mensch was here and said, I'm seeing this defense starting to get a little bit better. I'm watching number 9, even though he's not considered a full-time starter. Chris Cole, he's a redshirt sophomore, and he's kind of growing. And he's got tools, and he might be next at that linebacker position for Georgia. And then I watched C.J. Allen with the injury, and we're awaiting word. The initial report was hopefully it's not as bad as it seems, and he was limping. I think was he on crutches or at the end of the game. But now you got to remember Georgia's kind of in a good position, and he can hopefully get a little bit of rest and be ready for the college football playoff. But in his Chris Cole's rotating and playing in certain packages, but stepping in, like he led the team in tackles, did a fantastic job. And so we talked about on Saturday night, 11 tackles for loss, 7 sacks versus Texas last year. This year it wasn't as eye-opening and astounding, but it was still 7 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. And the biggest complaint I have for this Georgia defense, this year's version, compared to what we've seen in recent years when Georgia has been the king of the hill. And I mentioned those names, right? The Trayvon Walkers and the Jordan Davises and the Jalen Carters and the Devontae Wyatts. they're getting into pads and gap discipline this year, and they're doing those things as they're always taught with Kirby's defense. And it's less about sack production and big plays in the backfield from the front three and sometimes front four, depending on what front they're using. It's more about discipline. But in the old days, with those amazing defensive linemen that all won in the NFL, a lot of them with Philadelphia Eagles, so many of those guys all of those guys I mentioned, first-round picks. They were not only gap disciplining, they were getting in violently and jacking guys up and driving them back and then discarding offensive linemen and going and making plays. It's not happening nearly at the level that it did during those years. But I'm seeing a little bit more flashes of playmaking ability along the defensive front. And I've also talked to you about these linebackers and the blitzing, and that continues to happen. And yes, there can be vulnerability when you blitz, but Schumann and Smart are so calculated in a positive way in what they're doing with them. They're picking most of the time, not always, but most of the time, they're picking the right spots to do it. So this was the most disruptive defensive line game that I've seen from Georgia all season. Arch made a lot of good throws. Arch played well enough for Texas to wind up winning this game had the running game showed up and had the protection been a little bit better, and had there not been drops. I mean, there were a handful of significant drops in that game. But what Georgia did to affect that was they consistently were keeping him bottled up, kind of squeezing things in, driving it back, and Arch very rarely had a throw where it was just clean. And that's different from what we saw from Georgia early in the year. 3 of the sacks, as I mentioned, the linebackers, all 3 sacks were from the linebackers again this week. 33, Quintavious Johnson had 1, 0, Gabe Harris had 1, and 10, Zayden Walker had 1. Yes, you're left vulnerable, but it's very smart how they're doing it and when they're utilizing the blitz. And those linebackers are getting home, and if they're not getting home, they're getting a lot of pressure. So it's been very effective. So to me, Georgia right now is a huge surprise because I didn't foresee them getting to this level where I would be saying in mid-November, Georgia might be the best team in the SEC. A&M still undefeated. Alabama obviously has a lot going for it. Ole Miss has got a lot going for it, even though they struggled with Florida this last. There's a lot of good teams, is my point, in the SEC. Oklahoma is rising. All these things. But I'm looking at Georgia now, and I'm starting to see a team that maybe you want to face least of all the teams in the SEC. And maybe Georgia's the 3rd best team, maybe the 2nd best team in the country. We'll find out. All right. Tape truth number 2. This is where I need mensch, so I can take a sip of my lemon perfect and reset. Tape truth number 2. I'm going to go off the radar here a little bit, and we'll get back to the big games. But what we're witnessing at the running back position in some places across the country is absolutely special. And I want to remind people, last year, right? Last April, this year, but last April, there were 26 running backs that were drafted in the NFL. What does that mean, Todd? It was one of the best groups we've seen in almost 12 years. There were a whole bunch of them, 20 in fact, drafted in the top 200. That was the second most, 26 running backs drafted was the second most that we've seen in the last 12 years. So only one other time there were more. It was 30 in 2017. Names like Genty, Omarion, Judkins, Henderson, Scadaboo, Harvey, ETN, and beyond, all gone. So the natural question was coming into this year in college football, are we going to see a massive dip at the running back position? Where's all the talent at running back? There's no way we can have the same level. But I'm watching this past Saturday as we get into this time of year, right? Weather's changing. It's colder. We're starting to see precipitation, winds picking up. Especially in certain areas of the country, you've got to lean on the run game. And I saw a handful. I will focus on three and mention a fourth, but there were a handful of places in the country this past week where the running game and specific running backs absolutely took over the game. Let's start with Notre Dame at Pitt. Game day's there, all the hype. Narduzzi and the defensive side of the ball, and they played their quarters, and you can get matchups in the passing game, your slot receiver against their safeties, and typically Pitt does a good job versus the run. Excuse me. Jeremiah Love just did Jeremiah Love things. And I can't do a whole section, a whole tape truth on the running back position without mentioning Love. We've talked a lot about him. And the thing that I'm excited about, all three of these guys that I'm going to feature, we actually got on it early. Everyone was on Jeremiah Love early, but the next two guys are guys that we got on as they were kind of just breaking out and what's to come. And we were telling you these guys are workhorses and these guys are going to carry their teams late in the season when the weather changes and when they need them. And Love, it's no different. They still have Jadarian Price. I got news for you, folks. He might be a first-round pick. If he's not first, he's going to be second round. But Love has emerged as someone that I view, I'm starting to put him in like the Bijan level. And I'll be the first to admit, I knew he was the best back in the country coming into the year. Everyone did. So no congratulations to me or Steve or anyone else. But I didn't know that he was going to be at like that Ginty, Bijan, elite running back level. He's corrected me. His combination of size and like ballerina feet. I know that's something that a football player does, but like if you watch, I call him like poetry in motion. He is so smooth. We saw everyone watch that highlight reel, the spin move that he had, but it's more than that. It's how smooth he is with his feet. And then when he sees a crease, that level of acceleration that he has that most big backs just don't possess. And he's catching the ball well. Only 2 catches for 20 yards in this game. We finished with 23 carries, 147 yards, and a touchdown. I want you to go back to the beginning of the year. Oh, by the way, his pass protection, I just watched a reel yesterday. He's improved there too. So, like, what doesn't he have as a pro prospect? And also, what doesn't he have now as Notre Dame's getting in this stretch run? Heavily favored the last 2 games. No conference championship game. In fact, I'm urging Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame, let's not forget what happened last year. Let's not try to get Jeremiah Love to New York. He's already done enough to get to New York. And if he doesn't get there, he doesn't get there. This is about the college football playoff. This is about having Jeremiah Love healthy. Look at the run that Notre Dame made last year in the college football playoff. And they did it with all intents and purposes without Jeremiah Love. He was not healthy. He tried to gut through it, but he just wasn't the same back. Imagine this team, the improvement we've seen going into the playoff with a fully healthy Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and some of those receivers that I've talked about stepping up. So to me, it's about now kind of easing up the workload on Jeremiah Love the next couple of weeks and getting him ready for the college football playoff because there's plenty of time between now and that first game. And I look at the size of him, the versatility that he has. Now he's protecting better. Now he's catching the ball really well. The sweet feet that he has and the acceleration, the contact balance that he has to continue runs after contact. After 2 games, he had 33 carries for 127 yards and a touchdown. Those 2 games were losses to Miami and A&M. Since those first 2 games, and the big question, it wasn't necessarily the A&M game because he had a decent amount of touches in that game and almost reached 100 yards. It was really the Miami game, but combine those 2, and it wasn't the workload you would think for the best back in college football and maybe one of the best 5-6 backs we've seen come out in the NFL draft in the last decade. He has had 144 carries for 1,008 yards and 13 touchdowns in the last 8 games. He's 3rd nationally, despite those first 2 games, 3rd nationally with 113.5 rush yards per game. If he doesn't get to New York, what the hell are we doing? And I have a Heisman vote, so I'll do my part. But as I mentioned, he's given me Bijan vibes, man. I'm not saying they're the exact comp of the two, but the size, the ability to contribute in the pass game, the acceleration, and every time he touches the ball, you have to take a deep breath. I think this Notre Dame team is going to be scary if he's 100%, and it looks like we're tracking towards that when we get to the college football playoff, and I'm excited to see it. All right, next up, Ahmad Hardy, Missouri. I know we're going on a long roll here, but that's okay. Mensch isn't here. We'll get to Bruce in a little bit. Ahmad Hardy, we talked about before, 5'10", 215 pounds. He was a transfer from Louisiana Monroe. And he came in this year. He won the starting job after just 1 year. He was a freshman All-American at Louisiana Monroe. Transfers in. He's like, yeah, SEC, no problem. I got this. Let's go, coach. And he has been the best, most productive back in college football this year. SEC defenses, yeah. I did it at Louisiana Monroe. I'll do it here. This past week, he was absolutely dynamic, devastating. Best individual performance I've seen from a running back all year long was Ahmad Hardy for Missouri this past week against Mississippi State. Completely took the game over. This guy was a battering ram on Saturday. 25 carries, 300 rushing yards, and 3 touchdowns, and that win over Mississippi State. His combination, I'll just sum it up real quickly. It's a confidence and a vision. This patience and kind of waiting for his spot. And then he's got this unique, like whether it's lateral or first 3 steps going vertical, explosion for a back who's probably a 4.55 guy in the 40-yard dash. And then you watch him at the end of runs. It's like zombie hunting if you're a defender trying to get this guy down. You think you've killed him and he just keeps going. 3, 4, 5, 7 yards at the end of carries. He leads the nation, Hardy does, with 1,346 rush yards, 134 per game, and third nationally with 15 rushing touchdowns. He's been absolutely special. We'll talk about him in 2027 for the NFL draft, but this year, I'm just talking about him as one of the most dynamic running backs in all of college football. Finally, Kewan Lacy, another back that just took things over when its team needed him the most. And another back in the SEC, just like Hardy. Kewan Lacy, we talked about a couple weeks ago, right? He's become the best asset for the defense for Ole Miss and for a pedestrian defense for Ole Miss. And this is a team that's marching towards the college football playoff. And Lane Kiffin has identified that. Lane Kiffin grew up the son of Monty Kiffin and the Tampa 2, the godfather of that, and great defensive mind. But he knows, as the son of Monty Kiffin, you've got to be strong in the run game. No matter what he's done in the past, zone read option, West Coast principles, tempo, not tempo, all of the different variations we've seen of Lane. The only thing that's always stayed the same with Lane, we will run the football. And this year with Trinidad Chambliss, who's not Jackson Dart, but has played at a really high level considering coming from the Division II level, first-year starter in the SEC, they've had to lean on the run game even more so. And Lacy, after being kind of nicked up and in and out, Lacy has found his groove, and we talked about it a few weeks ago. This guy's going to be the most important individual player for Ole Miss down the stretch. What does he do against Florida? And this was a grind. They were trailing in the fourth quarter. Then they had a 3-point lead in the fourth quarter. It looks like, oh, they beat Florida by 10. That was a real late touchdown to make it a 10-point game. This game was tight. This game was scary for Ole Miss. Lacy finishes with 33 offensive touches, 239 yards, 3 touchdowns in a game that Chambliss was kind of up and down and couldn't be counted on to play at the level that he has played at certain times this year. And this guy's doing it with this downhill run style, contact balance, initial burst, unbelievable instincts as a back. It allows him to anticipate and kind of weave through. And guys bouncing off of him. You don't get clean hits on this guy. It's been really fun to watch. And he's protecting the ball. I think he always has 1 fumble this season, despite all these touches. And that's critical too. I want to throw in a fourth name for the running backs, Kaytron Allen. He got in the action. 28-10 for Penn State. I know everyone's kind of over talking about Penn State. They had the 2 big games, almost, close with Ohio State for a half, and then almost knocked off Indiana. So, all right, Penn State's out of sight, out of mind. They beat Michigan State 28-10. He had 25 carries for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's that time of year, folks. Running backs play a critical part. We've talked about receivers and quarterbacks and defenses and everything else. You watch how important these running backs are now as we get to the end of the regular season, the championship games, and the college football playoff. And those are 4 really special guys doing it, but they're not the only ones. Tape truth number 3. Ty Simpson has not been perfect, but chill on the narrative. Like I read it, I hear it, and he's had some mistakes in the last few weeks, and it hasn't been perfect, and it hasn't been as characteristic of what we saw maybe in the first 6-7 games of the season. But let's not lose perspective on what's going on here. Let's give you some background here. Alabama had nearly twice as many total yards in this loss to Oklahoma. 23-21 was the final. Nearly twice as many yards, 406 to 212, as Oklahoma did. Possessed the ball for 35 minutes and 28 seconds of the game. Only had 2 penalties. They did have 3 turnovers, and that was a massive part of it. And so it's easy to start pointing, well, that's all on Ty. But follow me here, okay? I look at this situation with Alabama, and you've got to look at it from 2 different things. What's going on over the last few weeks that has been kind of mounting, and the naysayers are coming out, and the McShay's an idiot, and everyone else is an idiot, whether it's Orlovsky or this guy, that guy, and draft pundits. And I just have to laugh because if you're watching the tape, you can see a full perspective, and there's 2 different things to look at here. There are a few things that Ty has there's been kind of some flaws recently that you can see in his game. Also, the Oklahoma aspect of it and Brent Venables, which I'll get to in a second. And then the third part is, what would Alabama be without Ty Simpson? And the answer's scary if you're an Alabama fan. If you're one of these people out there that's driving this narrative that it's Ty's fault and Ty, laughing at him as an NFL draft prospect, A, you don't know what you're talking about. And B, I want you to take a step back and ask, what would Alabama be with a quarterback that wasn't playing at this level, okay? All right, so let's get into it. I look at the run game continuing to be an issue. Yes, there were flashes, and I know they made an offensive line adjustment to the right side, I believe it was this week, and there were times where it's like, oh, Alabama's starting to get their run game going. But at the end of the day, this run game produced just 80 yards against Oklahoma. Not good enough, especially for Alabama, but not good enough for anywhere, okay? 59 rush yards against LSU. Do you know what Alabama ranks in rushing game, yards rushing per game in all of the FBS? 123rd. They rushed the ball for just 108 yards per game. Do you remember the Garrett Nussmeier effect a year ago when Garrett Nussmeier was healthy and was dealing? Do you remember watching him, how great he was for a portion of the season, and all of a sudden, because they couldn't run the ball and he's having to throw 30, 40 times a game, and he's taking all those hits because defenses and defensive coordinators know that they can't run the football, so they don't have to kind of gear up and play as discipline, and they can get after the quarterback? And Nussmeier took this dip until he had time off before the bowl game. It's the same thing I'm seeing from Ty Simpson in a certain degree. I don't see it affecting him physically. But there's a wear and tear that happens with a guy who's not 6'4", 230 over the course of a season going up against SEC defenses that are just teeing off on this guy, okay? So that's one part of it. The second part of it was, I thought on Saturday specifically, and this tape truth is supposed to be all about Ty Simpson, but you're going to see it morph for a little bit. The coaching job that Brent Venables did Saturday was as good of a defensive coaching job as I can remember all season long and maybe beyond. It was his Holland's opus. It was his moment. Bringing that defense without its star edge rusher, by the way, our Mason Thomas, who we've talked about as one of the 3 best pass rushers in all of college football, going into Tuscaloosa and to execute it like a high-level NFL defense was, when I sat down and got finished with the tape, I just sat back and was like, whew. Like, Venables has to be almost in tears watching his defense go out and do exactly what he asked of them every single play. It was a combination of blitzing at the right time, showing four-man fronts. I watched this, like, they would show 6 almost every single time and wind up rushing 4. The problem for Alabama was you didn't know where the launch points were, man. You had no idea where they were coming from. And I'll get to some specific plays in a little bit. But they're overloading one side, dropping guys from the other. And then I talked to you on Saturday night about like the string that's attached. And usually if they come with pressure here and one of those guys who could be in coverage comes, the string's attached with this defender behind him. Well, they were breaking that string and throwing the string on another defender. And so now all of a sudden Ty Simpson's got pressure coming on him. But the look is completely different than what you're used to with a hot read. And so it created some confusion. The pick 6 was absolutely Venables' brilliance. And I talked about it on Saturday night watching it during the game. And then I watched it on tape and it was even more brilliant than I thought. Follow me here, okay? They show 6, as I mentioned, rush 4. From the quarterback's perspective, they rush 2 extra guys from Ty Simpson's right. They drop the 2 guys who are on the edge on the left side. So as a quarterback, your job is to throw into the blitz. Find your hot route on that side. That's what he does. Venables knows how smart this cat is. Venables knows, hey, if I bring that pressure and drop those guys off, he's going to pick it up. So let's fuck with him a little bit. And that's exactly what he did. Instead of it being man-to-man or a simple zone on the side that Ty Simpson's going to Isaiah Horton, who's running kind of a slant route, he brings the safety down to the flat and creates this high-low bracket coverage on Horton. So if they try to go vertical, the cornerback is getting depth in his drop, and he's there to contest. If they try to undercut it with a slant, which is what they did, I got a safety coming in the flat. Pick 6. All Venables. Execution from the players, don't get me wrong. But a brilliant strategy. That's just one play. This went on and on and on. The thing I'll say for Alabama, and I have been the biggest Ryan Grubb proponent and backer all season long, they've got to figure out their protections. And it's not a Ty Simpson thing that he's getting the wrong protect. It's what they're trying to do. Because if you're only having 4 rushers, I shouldn't have my running back protecting against Kip Lewis, who is blitzing over and over again, that A gap coming up the middle. I shouldn't have my running back isolated on him as many times as they did. It should be like we've got to adjust the protections up front. And so that became a problem throughout the game and really kind of accelerated in the second half. I went back even because I'm trying to figure out this whole narrative, this like undercurrent of Ty Simpson, what a joke, is building. So, and I'm not, listen, if Ty's not playing to the level, I'm fine. And there are things Ty's doing. I went back and watched all turnover-worthy plays from Ty this entire season. It's a short clip reel, man. There's only 11 plays. Considering the amount of offense that he's having to carry without a run game. Ball security and his ball carriage in the pocket when things start to squeeze is absolutely an issue. He's had 5 fumbles in the last 5 games. It can be fixed, but it's got to be fixed before the college football playoff. Because he's laying the ball on the ground at least 1 time per game in the last handful of games. 5th consecutive game, as I said, with a fumble. There have been times where he's been overly aggressive with some throws, and it's led to an interception or 2, maybe 2. There are some deep throws that he's been off target. He had 11 off-target throws in this game, but that was more about protection and different things. There was one that, everyone's got on social media where he just overshot his receiver. I get it. But for the most part, he's been deadly accurate, except he's been just kind of up and down on the deep ball. So those are areas that he can continue to improve. I want to remind you, he's a first-year starter in the SEC carrying an entire offense. I also want to point out, though, that Ty Simpson adjusted. And the first two series, really, there were some struggles and there were some different looks and Venables and throwing different things. He and Grubb adjusted, except for the protection stuff in the second half. And he also did some awesome stuff. He was 28 of 42 for 326 yards. That's like 120 plus yards more than Oklahoma had total offense. And he threw for a touchdown. Alabama has some stuff that it's got to get right if it's going to wind up making a run in the college football playoff towards the national championship. Ty has some little things that he needs to clean up, but Ty ain't one of the problems. Let's start with the pass protection, and let's start with the run game if we're going to start putting a lot of the blame here. All right, tape truth number 4. If USC wide receiver Makai Lemon was playing at Ohio State or in the SEC, he'd be getting the full treatment right now. This guy is on a roll. I've talked to you about Makai Lemon and his rising stock in the NFL draft ranks, right? And I've told you that there's only a few other guys that are being mentioned in the first round, and Lemon's one of them. And we'll get to that in a minute. The last 2 weeks, though, quietly, for some reason, he has had 21 catches for 314 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yes, it was Northwestern. Yes, it was Iowa. But Iowa's a really good football team. Iowa almost beat Oregon. Iowa jumped USC, and they absolutely needed every ounce of production that they got from Lemon. So I went back and I watched the tape because I want to share with you guys like what special is going on with this young man, and why is it that he's not getting the attention like a Carnell Tate or a Jeremiah Smith or a Ryan Williams or Jeremy Bernard or any of these other stars that we know at the wide receiver position in the SEC or at Ohio State. Ryan Wingo does this in the last 2 weeks. We're going crazy. Jeremiah Smith does this the last 2 weeks. That's all we can talk about. No one's talking about Lemon. His production's been awesome, but the NFL stuff that he's doing as a route runner is like when I went back and watched the last couple of games, he has advanced his game so much. Like subtleties, getting off the line of scrimmage, in breaking routes, sharpness, like exploding out of breaks. And then it's not just like slants and crossers and some of the college stuff that we get used to seeing, the bubble screens and the quick game. It's like down the field stuff. And he's doing it with this body control and acceleration out of breaks and like understanding how to set up defensive backs. The other part of it is the downfield contested catches. He's not the biggest cat in the world, but he plays big. And he's sturdy built, and the focus he has with the ball in the air. I'll take you to a couple plays. 2 minutes left in the second quarter. Contested catch. Focus while elevating, taking the hit. Like, I need this toughness and reliability in a wide receiver. You'll see it on social media everywhere. Going up, defender like undercutting him in traffic. So you can watch his eyes see it in. Nothing else matters. We've talked about Ryan Williams. We've talked about some other great receivers. Been a little bit up and down catching the ball. Not Makai Lemon. Let me take you to another play. 13:39 third quarter. The pluck and the toe tapping along the sideline. Defender draped all over him. That's going to be a theme here, right? Big time stuff. 7:03 third quarter. Tracking the ball over his shoulder, down the field. Fingertips catch. But just the ability to go track it and get there and the focus to bring it in. And then guess what? Defender hanging on him again. And then finally, 3:33, third quarter. The touchdown catch, right? Contested. Focus, 2 defenders converging on him. It's the hand-eye coordination in traffic that translates to the NFL game. And it's also what's allowed him to become one of the most productive receivers in the country. And you've got Ava. And you've got the run game that's been kind of hot and cold, but pretty good throughout the entire season. You got a defense that's playing better. And now all of a sudden we get this Oregon game. And we started the year and we thought Evan Stewart was going to be there. And I'm going to get to Kenyon Sadiq in a second. Makai Lemon's is the best weapon on the field for either of these teams. And if they're going to pull off a win against Oregon, a huge upset against a top 10 team, he's going to have another monster game. Again, after 21 catches, 314 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I want to make this perfectly clear, okay? I'm starting to see in Makai Lemon what I saw in Lad McConkey, Emeka Ibuka, those guys who came in and immediately made huge impacts in the NFL because it translates. Thick, sturdy, route running, savvy, crispness, reliability for their quarterbacks, contested catches. That's the NFL game. You're not running away from DBs. You're not getting these huge passing windows created by scheme or your talent. You've got guys around you draped on you all the time. You got to learn to get to win the margins and then to make the tough catches with guys around you, draped on you, the physicality. Lemon's got it. So when I start looking at this draft and I see Jordan Tyson from Arizona State and I see Carnell Tate, Ohio State, deservedly first-round draft prospects, I'm looking at Makai Lemon. I'm saying, I don't know that there's a big gap. I really don't. So on Saturday, you're going to be forced to watch it this week because they're playing Oregon and it's a big matchup in the Big Ten. But keep it in mind as the season progresses, just a couple more weeks. Like, this guy is must-see television. He's playing better than Casey Concepcion, who's getting all the love, and even Mario Craver at Texas A&M. He's playing better than Denzel Boston, Chris Bell from Louisville, Boston from Washington. Jeremy Bernard. I love Jeremy Bernard. You can make an argument he's playing better than Jeremy Bernard. Makai Lemon's, he's doing some special stuff. All right, tape truth number 5. We'll wrap it up and we'll get to Bruce. This one's an interesting one. Listen to me closely, I should say, as I go through this, because some stuff happened last week. Tape truth number 5. This is the Kenyon Sadiq that the Ducks need. Okay? You have to go back to Friday night's game. Season highs in receptions with 8 receiving yards, 96. Oregon blows out Minnesota. Statement game for them, not in the college football landscape, but this is one that Dan Lanning wanted to come out, and he wanted his team to show them that they could take care of an opponent, put them away, and do it in dominant fashion. And that's exactly how the Ducks responded. But the most important individual effort in this game was from Sadiq. Remember, this is a program with a really talented young quarterback. Super talented, super inexperienced, Dante Moore. Their running back position, Noah Whittingham and like 5 other backs, has gotten better and better as the season's progressed. And you saw that on display Friday night against Minnesota. But at the pass catching targets have been a question. Evan Stewart injured in the preseason, potential first-round pick. Huge loss. Imagine if Jeremiah Smith out, Ryan Williams is out for the year. That's the kind of loss that Oregon suffered for their program, okay? But they get this young cat in Dakota Moore, true freshman, who's burst on the scene. Early in the season, we were talking about him like just rare air. The same kind of stuff Ryan Williams was doing as a true freshman a year ago. He was doing early on in the season. He's kind of gotten quiet. He kind of slow. Season high catches was 7 against Penn State. But since then, he's been out the last 2 weeks. And if you look at the rest of the season, never more than 4 catches. So Penn State, he had 7. But even in those other games, 4 catches were his high for the game, the total. So they've needed Kenyon Sadiq to step up. Now, I want you to think about the target share for tight ends, first-round tight ends, guys who are these awesome difference makers who are going to be drafted in the first 32 picks in the NFL because they're that special at that position. Teams don't love drafting a tight end in round 1. So if you're going to be drafted as high as Colston Loveland was and Tyler Warren were, both top 15 picks, I believe, somewhere in that range, it's got to be that you're special, you're different, and you probably had a huge target share in your offense. Go look at the target share for Colston Loveland in Michigan. Go look at it for Tyler Warren, my goodness, for Penn State, right? They weren't getting that at Oregon. I made some comments, and this is, follow me here. I made some comments last week, and about Kenyon Sadiq, the target share, kind of some frustration. Those comments were not taken lightly, not appreciated. And I'm aware of the behind the scenes stuff that went on, and maybe the memos sent and this and that. And I'm aware. I'm also aware that what I said was absolutely true, and people just didn't want it to come out. And I'm also here to say I love Kenyon Sadiq. I said it last week when I was saying the things. I think he's a special talent. I think he's a first-round pick. I think we all want to see the best of Kenyon Sadiq. And so maybe it helped to light a fire because people inside that building got pissed off. Pissed off at me, pissed off at the information coming out, all of it. But maybe it helped to light a fire because all of a sudden that target share went to where I thought it should be for this kind of talent. And this past week against Minnesota, he is a featured part of the offense. So let's just leave it at that. On tape, watching him, fingertips, diving catch first quarter inside the 5-yard line. Awesome play, displaying that athleticism. But they're going to him. They're trusting him. They're making him a featured part of the pass attack. Then the slant in the red zone, bounces off of tackles, muscles his way into the end zone, but apparently on review, he was down. So they go right back to him, touchdown catch. Next play, contested back right corner. Nice job separating quickly from the linebacker. So most targets he's had, 8 all season long. 7 was his previous high against Penn State. They had to throw the ball in that game, obviously, with DeCorian Moore and Sadiq both getting their largest target share of the season there. But in all other games, 4 was the most targets he had in a single game. He had 8 in this game. After the comments, after the frustration, after the week off with the injury, clearly Sadiq has got a fire lit. Clearly Sadiq has to be a guy that's a massive part of what they do moving forward. And as they try to make this run, starting with USC on Saturday, college football playoff, Sadiq's got to play like he played against Minnesota. They need that out of him. That's it for Tape Truths this week. Bruce is next. I'm fired up because he's my blind spot with all the college coaching carousel. So we're going to bring in Bruce now. This episode is brought to you by American Eagle. Gift, hooray! Want to make the people in your life happy this holiday season? Then give great jeans with American Eagle. They've got everyone on your list covered, including you. So make sure to check out the wish list worthy new arrivals, including comfy, cozy sweaters, soft fleece, sweatshirts, hoodies, flannels, and lots more. Plus, you'll love their trending jeans, like the high-waisted stovepipe, original straight, boot cut, and a whole bunch of other fits. They've got every style and everyone covered. You can check it all out at ae.com or just go to the store. As promised, good friend Bruce Feldman is here. Bruce, I need help with this stuff, man. I'll X and O you and NFL draft, and we'll scout and all day long. I've got some contacts, but my goodness, like you are always on top of a lot of things in college football, but certainly when it comes to the coaches, the programs, the backstories, kind of what's been going on. And I want to do some storytelling with you and find out some of the information that you're getting. Can you believe here we are in mid-November and the names of these programs, like LSU, Penn State, Florida, Auburn, Arkansas, UCLA, Stanford, Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech. Like I can't remember a year quite like this. And I guess let's start with this. If there's one thing that you're hearing right now, or there's some urgency in terms of what's going to, come up in the next handful of days, what would it be?
The Virginia Tech situation is they're expected to be the first ones off the board, meaning the first vacancy that gets filled. They've had their eyes on James Franklin for a while. They've been talking to James Franklin for a while. James Franklin, from what we've been told, has been wondering, all right, is Florida State going to open? What are the other options here potentially? And I think Virginia Tech came through it to wanting an answer basically by now. So by the time this goes up, he'll either have accepted the job or they'll move on to either maybe Bob Chesney from James Madison, or maybe they'll try to hope they can land John Sumrall from Tulane. But he's also both those guys have not other options for sure, but like John Summerall has definitely got interest from Auburn, and he's an Alabama native and did really well at Troy. Bob Chesney is drawing a lot of interest from UCLA. So this is where you get a lot of wires getting crossed and different things like that. And again, because Virginia Tech wants to move first, which I totally get it. That's why they could be the first domino to fall.
It's a dangerous game if you're Franklin, right?
Yeah, because it's like that game of musical chairs. If there's something you really want and it doesn't come open, or you maybe overplay your hand. Now the flip side could be, I know some people are like, yeah, it probably wouldn't be a bad thing for James to sit out a year, and kind of maybe recharge his batteries, maybe take a little more time to reevaluate everything, because you've just been in this grind for so long. Now, everything that I know about him is he's not a big hobbies guy. He's a big football guy.
Yeah.
He doesn't golf. He's not Brian Kelly. It's like, so I think he feels like I'm getting right back into this. I'm getting right back on the horse. And look, he has a lot of regional ties in that area. The Virginia Tech, Penn State jobs have quite a bit of overlap. And look, if he goes into the ACC, as you well know, the ACC is very gettable. You get it going there. There's no Ohio State in the ACC. There's no Oregon in the ACC. Whatever's happened with Clemson, it's not the same. So I could see why people are going, Virginia Tech. That's, we know Frank Beamer won there. There's some good talent in the recruiting pool around there. They financially have upgraded their commitment. So this will be interesting.
Shane Beamer obviously struggling. Is that a name that has come up with Virginia? I know, like, online and in different circles, but is there anything to that? Like,
I didn't think there was, Todd, just because everything he's always said is, I don't want to go, be Frank's son, as a professional coach, right? And to some degree, that's always going to be part of his identity. But I think in that regard, going back to Blacksburg, now what's kind of nutty is just a year ago, he's going to a 9-3 season. And as you know, like, it's not just Lenore's. He's got, he's won some high level battles for some big time recruits.
Yeah.
And I think he's I don't want to say he's definitely recruited better than Spurrier did, because Spurrier recruited well there too. But I do think he has made them dangerous there. But you saw, like, kind of both sides of it this past weekend when they're in College Station. They can play good enough where you got an edge rusher who can make a big play and force a big play. And, Sellers may not complete 65% of his passes, but there'll be big plays. Nick Harbor, he's my, like, 2-time biggest freak. He's not getting caught. So you see elements of that. But I think there's also some frustration around with people at South Carolina and going, this is what we're going to constantly get from him, where it's a lot of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back.
You mentioned Brian Kelly. He's you have this now lawsuit and everything going on with LSU. I have a relationship with Brian. I appreciate some of the things about Brian, but I also recognize that there are a lot of people out there that don't appreciate Brian Kelly in certain elements. All of that aside, how much damage did this do to Brian Kelly, this stop in Baton Rouge, and how it played out? And what do you think is next for Brian?
I think what it showed was, like, I think Brian Kelly did a terrific job everywhere else he had been before that, and certainly at Notre Dame.
Yes.
Not an easy job. It's not an easy job
No.
to stay on the horse there either, by the way. It's a different kind of shelf life. And so he bailed, and he went to a place that he was a really bad fit, and you could just see it coming. And then it turned out to be probably, I don't want to say worse than you could have imagined, but it just didn't go well. They didn't have a top 10 season. They had a Heisman winner, but I think it was just getting a lot of stuff wrong in terms of the staffing, the recruiting, different things. Going forward, now you have a guy who's 64. And what does he want to do, right?
Yeah.
Because I think this is a different job as a college football coach than it was pre-portal, pre-NIL, right? I just think I don't want to say it's entirely a young man's game when Kurt Cignetti is killing it at Indiana, because he's almost the same age as Brian Kelly, but I think they're wired really different. Like, The one job I could see him maybe at is if Michigan State does open up. He's got a lake house up there. I could see it. But after that, I just don't see him go like when some of these group of five jobs, end up popping open because guys end up leaving for other jobs, whether it's Tulane or USF or Memphis or North Texas. I don't see Brian Kelly wanting one of those jobs,
No,
right?
no.
There's only so many jobs I could see him wanting. Michigan State, maybe. I'm not sure beyond that what he could get because, if you're Penn State, I don't know how you sell him there because the recruiting is a big issue with him and how committed is he to doing it at this stage of his career. I think that's to me that was as much of his undoing as almost anything else was that, and just you got to work at it and you got to like this job is way more
the
demanding
relationship
now.
development with the young men. It felt like that. If you want to summarize it, it felt like that was a big part of it. That there was a feeling of there. Just
Oh yeah, I mean we did two stories, one last year and one this year at the Athletic on his struggles there. And one of them, the starting center for 2 years there under Brian Kelly was on the record with us going, he just really didn't want to have a relationship. He didn't work at trying to, this wasn't like this was a walk-on who never saw the field. This was a starting center. He's like, you never really talked to him. It's just like, there's other guys I talked to for the story we did a couple of weeks ago. And it was like, we got recruits on the phone. They all want to be FaceTime. When I was around LSU in 2019, when they had that magical year, like you couldn't go 5 minutes without seeing some staffer come up to Ed Ogeron with a recruit's face on FaceTime wanting to talk to him. And that's a big part of the job. And from everything I was told, Brian Kelly would be like, have him make an appointment. And they're like, make an appointment. I got him on the phone right now. Like
right.
that doesn't work anymore. Like, and it definitely doesn't work at LSU or one of these places where you're in big recruiting battles. And that's why I just think there's only so many jobs that I think he would fit at now. And I'm just not sure how many of those jobs he would want. Maybe Michigan State, if it's open. I'm not sure what else would fit into that smaller box now.
I don't really feel like I have to promote what Bruce does because he's an absolute legend in his space. But if you want to read, I like the Freaks List is just one of my favorite reads all year long, and I know that that's shared by a lot of people in this industry and in a lot of just in the audience. But like the storytelling, the individual stories, some of the background that you're able to get, whether it's coaches, players, Bruce is a must follow, and the Athletic is where you can get all of his information, all of his stories. But
I appreciate that.
feel like,
Thank you.
yeah, of course, man. I feel like we've kind of buried the lead here. We've got LSU open. We've got Lane Kiffin out there. We've got Florida open. And you and I both have a relationship with Lane to a certain degree. And I know he lived out in your area for a while. He's absolutely loving all of this, right? And no coach leans into all of the trolling quite like Lane does. However, a decision is going to have to be made at some point, you would think. I hear less about LSU recently, and I've heard a lot about Florida, right? So take us through what your information is on, I guess, both of those schools, but specifically with Lane to start things off.
Yeah, I kind of with you on what you just said about, I hear more about Florida than I do about LSU. It doesn't mean LSU is not a factor, right? LSU, before Brian Kelly, the previous three coaches all won national titles. Lane knows how good of a job that is, but it's also a super dysfunctional one. There's not a lot of alignment there. The governor gets involved. I mean, really gets involved. It's like, and then people are like, is that really what the governor sounds like? It's like, does Lane want that soap opera? I think Lane's okay with soap opera. I don't think he wants a soap opera where.
Well, he likes to be the star of the soap opera.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to be in the supporting cast here.
Right.
And so
right.
He's like, wait, is that guy gonna be involved with me? So I think with Florida, remember, he spent a lot of time in Florida. He obviously did well at FAU when he really revitalized his coaching career in Boca. What's different now is, and I think Lane's interesting because the guy you and I both kind of got to know pretty well, from the Pete Carroll days and on, that's still him, right? What you're saying is true. Like, nobody loves to troll and get on social media the way Lane Kiffin does. It still kind of fits his personality, but I think he has evolved not only as a coach, but also as an adult. And you see this in terms of like living a cleaner life, and now his whole family. It's not just his ex-wife and his kids, but it's like his younger brother Chris and all their kids are really entrenched in Oxford and seem to be having a really like the time of their lives in this, to all be together. Obviously it's well known that both his parents passed away not too long ago, and I think for them all to be connected, I think has been cool for the Kiffins. Now, having said that, on top of it, Ole Miss is set up really well in terms of, in this day and age, it's way closer to the top of the SEC than it ever has been before, because of the portal, because of their commitment to NIL, because of Walker Jones, who kind of runs runs everything behind the scenes. For people who don't know him, he's a former Ole Miss defensive back who was a CAA agent working with Jimmy Sexton, and at one point worked at Under Armour as an Under Armour executive. So he's kind of been in his sweet spot with Ole Miss and his alma mater, and I think he's played a big role in helping Lane get this thing to the next step. I could see Lane staying at Ole Miss. I could also see him going, man, I don't know if I can get to the playoff at Ole Miss. Can I actually win it? Can I build a superpower here and build what Pete Carroll had at USC? Can I really do that at Ole Miss, or do I need to go to Florida to do it? I don't know the answer to that. I think we'll find out. But the question's going to be, as you know, like, look at their schedule. They're going to almost assured to make it to the playoff. So is Florida or whoever going to sit and go, all right, we're going to basically punt on this year's recruiting class and the portal window, because he's probably going to be really busy. And I don't know how that plays out. I mean, I know Ole Miss would love to announce something before the Egg Bowl about, like, staying. I know you thought he was going to go to Auburn 3 years ago, but he didn't, and that worked out great, and he's still here. We'll see. I think you're right. He loves being kind of the belle of the ball of the coaching carousel. There's a lot of big jobs, and there's not enough names out there to fill them.
Yeah, if it's interesting. I get it at Florida. If I'm Florida and not LSU, but if I'm Florida, I'm willing to wait as long as it takes to make absolutely certain, until he has signed a deal at Ole Miss or has gone somewhere else. Until that moment happens, Lane would be the guy that I have to get. And then if it doesn't happen, then you regroup, and obviously you have a plan B in the waiting. If I'm Lane, it is a tough call, but my goodness, I just get the sense he's never been happier. And as a person who's been through stuff in life, and like, when you kind of rebuild and you're in a happy place, I don't know that you want to mess with it. You know what I mean? I think you finally start to appreciate where you are in life, and some things are more important than you thought they were when you were 27 or 37. You know what I mean? So that's
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I think that's the question is going to be too. Like, you and I are living, relatively, when I say like less complicated lives, being like, we don't have 120 players. We also don't have, like, when we're talking about alignment, like, yeah, it seems like it's okay at Florida. It doesn't seem like it's okay at LSU. But now all of a sudden you go into that, you leave behind a very good job for a lot of uncertainty. And quite honestly, he knows he can get to the playoff at Ole Miss. Right. So what limitations are there on Ole Miss? Yeah, the stadium's not as good as Tiger Stadium or the Swamp, but you still have a pretty sizable recruiting pool and money there. So I don't know. I mean, logically, I would say he stays, but logic always doesn't work, in the coaching carousel.
Yeah, and especially with Lane, I think. So then there's LSU. Is it me? Because I'm not dealing with it every day. I'm watching players and get ready for the draft and all. But it feels like, for such a big program, and for all like the energy that happened with the Brian Kelly firing, here we are now, a few weeks removed. It feels like things have been really quiet in Baton Rouge. Is that a fair assessment? And where do you think kind of this winds up headed? Is there kind of a list of 2 or 3 names, or is it a wait and see? Are there specific guys that they're waiting for the season to end? I don't get at first I felt like there was a clear picture, like we're going to throw a big thing at Nick, but Nick's not going to take it. And then it's going to be Lane Kiffin. But it seems like that's all kind of quieted. And now I'm left wondering, just as kind of an outsider looking in, what's going on there? What is their mission with this search?
I think it's the dysfunction of the place. Remember, they got this lawsuit that nobody thinks they're going to win with Brian Kelly. That doesn't help anything.
No.
You like I said, you have the governor involved. You have a new AD who's been around in Verge Osborne, who's been around the program for 40 years. He's a former player who was Scott Woodward, the old AD's right-hand guy. I think there's overlap with the Auburn and the Florida searches, right? Like if I look at it, let's say if Lane's not involved, not ends up going to LSU, I could see them going, Eli Drinkwitz has done a really good job at Missouri. He's in the league. He's an offensive coach. They run the football. Like, I think this is a big thing. Like, it made old LSU people sick that LSU under Joe Sloan it was like, could they run the football? Will they commit to run it? It was just like not a thing, right? They're a little like USC folks in that regard. Yeah, Lincoln Riley has cute plays, but they want old school people like that want physical football, much like Notre Dame. Like like that's what they kind of want. And I think credit to Drinkwitz, like every year they have some guy racking up 1,500 yards, right? They find a guy.
About Ahmad Hardy with 300 yards this past week earlier on this show.
Yeah, it looks like Marshawn Lynch there, right? So and they've had that with a couple of guys now. So I don't know. Eli's personality, LSU would be interesting. I don't know if he's a slam dunk for a lot of people.
I can't imagine it.
The question I think on him is, does he feel like, all right, I'm at Mizzou, I need to stir it up a little more. Oh, I'm going to go there. I don't need to do that stuff. I don't know if that's the case.
Kind of like Cignetti year 1 versus Cignetti year 2 at Indiana.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But I think he's definitely in play. I could see them having an interest in Brent Key, who's an Alabama native, done a really good job at Georgia Tech, also really physical football. I don't think it's a slam dunk that they would jump at him. I don't know. I'm not as sold that they would go after Clark Lee. He's done a good job at Vandy, but I don't know if they look at it. I think there's some thought of, well, he's done really well. They may win 10 games. They may get to the playoff, but it was like, did they catch lightning in a bottle by hiring the New Mexico State guys? And also they brought Pavia, and Pavia was a program changer because of his just force of personality and everything he brought with it changed the whole culture. So that one, I don't know if I've always heard LSU money people would not hire a Tulane or a group of 5 guy. John Summerall is a terrific coach. He's at Tulane. He played in the SEC, coached in the SEC. I've never met anybody who's been involved in football who was not impressed by him. I would not be surprised if he's the Auburn head coach. I don't know if LSU would do it because, again, LSU does some nutty stuff. And unless they're backed into a corner, I don't think they're going to do the thing that may make the most sense. They're going to do the thing that sounds the coolest at the press conference.
Yeah, and then it just begs the question, if it's not Nick and it's not Lane and it's not Summerall and it's not Joe Brady.
Yeah, I don't think Joe Brady wants to be he's not far from getting a head coaching job in the NFL. And just everything I know about Joe is he does not want to work in the NFL in college. He didn't want to work in college football that much when it was 2019 before the craziness of all the portal movement and everything else. I just can't see him wanting.
No, I agree, but
lifestyle.
That's kind of one of the names when this first.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Everyone went right. 2019 and that magical year. So that one's going to be interesting. And then there's Penn State, and I feel like I know too much of the kind of dysfunction and some of the issues going on behind the scenes there. And forever it was Matt Rule, and and the ADs vacationing in Spain with Rule and their friends, and then all of a sudden, Rule's back at Nebraska, and you start to wonder, first of all, what kind of job is this? And obviously it's Penn State, but is someone racing to go up there with some of the things that are kind of in the backdrop and have to recruit there and try to go up against Ohio State and Michigan, and now the expanded Big Ten. And then you kind of look at, like, Brian Hartline would be my number one choice, but is that a move that he would want to make? What are you hearing on Penn State?
Yeah, I think so. The Pat Kraft, the AD, he worked with Rule together at Temple, so that made sense.
Yeah, of course.
And then obviously Signetti, they locked him up quick. Mike Elko this weekend, a Northeast guy. I think that would have been a great hire if they could have pulled that off. I don't think they got close to it, but and now you're getting in the part where I don't want to say it's like really reaching, but the names I've heard that they've had interest in, or some have kicked the tires on a little bit. Brian Daboll just recently fired from the Giants, as you know, not that far removed though from helping Nick Saban win a national title at Alabama. Pat Fitzgerald,
I would actually like that hire. I would like Fitzgerald, and I would be really interested. Daboll, I mean, I don't know the recruiting and managing all of that. I'm not saying positive or negative. I just think that there's an unknown despite some time in college. But Pat Fitzgerald's another name. I like both of those guys would make sense to me for different reasons.
Yeah, I think the key with both of them, especially Fitzgerald, is what staff is he putting together. He's he did an amazing job at his alma mater, but the last 2 years he was there, they were 4-20. Yeah. And I think, he's obviously shown he can do more with less. But now, does that mean that he's going to be able to overtake Ohio State? Like, Hartline is interesting because yes, you would be weakening Ohio State. He's proven to be an elite recruiter and an elite developer of receivers.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a big job, and it's different than Ryan Day taking over for Urban, because when Ryan Day did that, and this is not to diminish anything he's done, but he was able to keep Mickey Marotti, who ran the strength and conditioning program. He was able to keep Mark Pantoni, who ran the personnel side. Those are two huge pieces that you have to have in place. And they already had those things running at full blast. And then, keeps Larry Johnson, the D-line coach, kept a bunch of other good assistants. So if you're a Hartline, there's some of those things are there from James Franklin, but I don't think it's like you're starting from scratch essentially. And, to be a first-time head coach, you are really, really in the deep end of the pool here. Like, I don't know how, it's just a big gamble on that. Like, it's if you told me he was going to be the first-time head coach at West Virginia, I would be like, okay, that could be a good hire for. Yeah. But it's but Penn State is so much of a bigger job, and you're really on the high wire now. And every mistake becomes glaring and you get in a hole. I'm not saying he has no chance at the job, but it would be a pretty big gamble to hire a first-time head coach there who honestly does not have that, he has he's the offensive coordinator this year, but he's also the offensive coordinator where the head coach was the offensive coordinator too. So it's I don't say you're working with a net there, but it's a gamble. And I would say this for pretty much any first-time head coach who's never been the head coach, to get a Penn State job or to get an LSU job or to get Florida. Because look, Will Muschamp was a hot assistant coach a long time ago. He went there and he didn't go great. It doesn't mean, Bob Stoops killed it at Oklahoma on his first job, and Kirby obviously did at Georgia. What's a little different is, I'm not saying you can't do it now. I do think it's a little harder to do it where it's a new place. Like Marcus Freeman took over for Brian Kelly, right? And he built it and he grew into the job. But I think it's just a lot more stuff is going on. There's a lot more stuff you have to manage now because of the portal and because of the transient nature of college football. And it's just harder to build a culture like that. And there's so many moving parts. That's why I think the first-time head coach at a huge job is something that if I was an AD, I would probably be a little reluctant to do.
All right. So if I had to put you on the spot and say Virginia Tech will be the first to announce whether it's Franklin or that Franklin, it's not Franklin. Um, if you had to guess, which one of these bigger jobs will be the next domino to fall?
Um, are we calling UCLA a bigger job? I don't know if
No, but you
that's.
can, if you get some information,
I
let
wouldn't
us
be
have it.
surprised if UCLA went from there. Like again, it's been open for a long time. You're also like the things that are a little complicated. Let's say Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is looking at a bunch of good group of five head coaches. Eric Morris, the head coach at North Texas. Colin Klein's the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M, former K-State star. You have Alex Golish from USF. I don't know if the guys in the mix for that jump at it if they're sitting there going, well, Baylor might come open, or something else that like
Yeah.
some of those guys think they can get. I would guess if you're Auburn, ideally they would love to have a hire like the day after the Iron Bowl. That's not that far away.
No, a couple weeks.
I would think, again, with Auburn, like Eli, I'm not saying he's definitely going to leave, but he's not going to be in the playoff. Like you could make that move. I don't think there's no way Lane Kiffin's in play for that job. Now, Georgia Tech, if and same thing with Clark Lee. Technically, both Georgia Tech and Vandy could still be in playoff consideration. So I feel like there's a better chance of Auburn filling earlier than LSU or Florida. So if I had to hedge, I'd go, okay, maybe UCLA, maybe Auburn, come up in the next 2 weeks.
And typically, what we've seen the last few years, guys are bailing from college to go to the NFL. Anything on like Tommy Rees, who's the OC at the Browns, or Zach Robinson, OC for the Falcons? I've heard Rees maybe at UCLA. I've heard Robinson, maybe Zach Robinson,
Oklahoma State, yeah.
Oklahoma State. Is anything there or?
I think Zach Robinson could be in play there. Now he's never been a college coach. Obviously spent a lot of time with the Rams with McVay, but he played at Oklahoma State. I've heard his name in there. It's not the other thing that's worth keeping in mind is it's like, some of these guys are like one step away from getting an NFL head coaching job. Like with the Falcons, it's not going great right now. So I don't know if he's looking at it going, you know what, I can go back and be a coordinator 5 years from now if I don't love being my alma mater. Tommy Rees has spent a lot of time in Southern California. I could see him doing, because obviously the Browns are a mess, right? But I could see him being interested in it, but he's, kind of ping pong back and forth from a bunch of different places. I know he's really well thought of by a lot of folks inside of football. Man, the UCLA job is a tough one though. Like, because what's going into it, and a lot of the stuff because people who've worked there before. But like you have a really weird situation with the AD, Martin Jarmond, who nobody locally is happy with. And his reputation among the football community is probably worse than it is even with the UCLA fans. And I think his buyout is like $7 million. So even if, Casey Wasserman, who's the big donor, the football building's named after at UCLA, even if he tells somebody, hey, we're just going to reassign Martin. Like, really? Are you going to is he going to be the AD for other sports, but not football? Like, I don't know how that works. And I just think that UCLA, as the coach at UCLA, they're going to want you to be PT Barnum and raise do stuff that a lot of head coaches don't do. They just are not out there constantly trying to go raise funds and do that. Like, that sounds great in theory, but that's not how it works at most places. And so is that the job? I don't know. Again, I don't know Tommy Rees well enough to know, does he sit there and go, you know what, I could kill it there. And then, because remember, you're in the Big Ten, you're got these, kind of nutty travel, schedules from, kind of disconnected from it. You're Like, this isn't when Jim Mora had UCLA, when USC was in the middle of heavy scholarship reductions. USC is not like what it is with Pete Carroll, but they're way better resourced than UCLA. So I don't know. I think that job is a tough one. If you have a NFL, you're already in the NFL. I don't know why you jump into it unless you have a real special connection to it.
Bruce, this has been absolutely awesome, man. We just went through the entire nation and all the coach. I can't thank you enough. You're going to have to come back on the shows. I wanted to get to the freaks list and start talking about the draft. We have plenty of time before April to kind of dig into that and pick your brain on some of the stories and the backgrounds. And so we'll have to have you back on, and that's a great thing for us. And hopefully you view it the same.
I do. And I think I've told you this offline. I'm like a big fan of what you guys do on Instagram. I think the videos are just really, they're just really smart, and they're fun. And they like I've never thought I'd be like a big content consumer on Instagram, but that's the way I started finding a lot more stuff now. And I just think they're really digestible. Whoever your group is doing it is really killing it on that. So that's been really awesome to help kind of promote your product.
Yeah, I mean, Alicia's sitting here in the chat right now, and she's been a huge addition to our group. And we've got John, and and Marissa's putting it all together. The only thing I do is I rant and I rave for like 7-8 minutes, and then they cut it up into something that's concise and actually digestible. So they make me look great on those.
But it feels like it is an authentic, hey, two guys just talking, two informed guys are talking about a prospect. And it's fresh, and it's just like no BS, and it's like it cuts through. And for whatever reason, that doesn't happen most times, and it's cutting through on when I see it on my phone, whenever it pops up. So hats off to you guys. Awesome.
I appreciate you saying that. That makes a lot of people here happy. So great talking to you. Have an awesome Thanksgiving and holiday season. And we'll get you back on, I'm sure, during the college football playoff run and then leading up to the draft. So look forward to talking to you again, buddy.
Appreciate it. Next time.
All right, man. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC, Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 1-800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.